Today I'm going to take you through a few little stories from my past which illustrate what a lifelong work it has been to face life's tragedies and this perpetual question of what can I do? What can we do when we're confronted with these things? Which I hope will be useful. But first of all, let's come back to the stillness. Feet on the ground, simply listen and look. Be present, just where we are. So that immediately we feel the presence, and miraculously, no matter how chaotic the world may be, we are at peace. In fact, the chaos is contained in this peace. Prove it for yourself. Eternal presence. So we have old-fashioned words and phrases like, God holds the whole world in his hand. Let me take you back to when I was a young farmer, just 21 years old, or maybe it was a year or two later, when Dad had bought 3 grass fields just up the road from where I live now. And I loved these fields with a passion that only a young farmer can, and realized that my feet, I wore big boots then, my feet were crushing and hurting the grass. My God, what does that? How can I not walk across my field without hurting the grass? And I think back now, this was one of the first, I don't quite know what to call it, but one of the first things that really sort of prompted me after this long search of what we are, what we're about, what we're doing here on this earth. If I, a farmer, always worship this green grass underneath my feet, and I've always been, I suppose, brought up on fairy tales as a boy, and fairies have always seemed very sort of real to me. I've often been alone in the country and felt a sort of silent presence, felt something there, there's more there than just the outer physical forms. And, the old pictures show us fairies sitting on flowers and things without hurting the flowers. Why is it possible fairies can do this and I can't? Why can fairies dance across a field without disturbing it and I can't? Why can't I be like a fairy? Well, it's not as stupid as it seems, does it? What are fairies? Well, I don't know any more than you do, but perhaps one can say they're spiritual beings. They don't have these great clumsy bodies that we have. They are from a lighter, more spiritual world. But all this seemed way beyond my comprehension at the time. It was a start. And another experience that I'd like to share with you, which again I have told before, but it's worth hearing again, is that I had pigs, used to keep pigs. Well, the thing about pigs, however much you love them, is that they grow fat and you have to sell them. They go away to be killed. Well, this worried me because the worst part of being a farmer is that you send your animals away to be killed. And anyway, what could I do? Well, I started going with my pigs to the slaughterhouse. I went in the lorry with them, and when they were in the pen, before their time came, I would just be there sitting with them, talking to them as best I could and trying to comfort them, I suppose. And I just learned to meditate just about then. And I'd learned that there is this amazing stillness that one can access. It's actually real, that you can find this stillness by being still and observant, present. Yeah. And so I sort of held my pigs in this stillness and went with them where they were stunned and killed and hung up. Went with them all the way, holding them in this stillness. And I didn't really understand then quite what it was all about, but certainly it gave me a sense of comfort and that somehow I was doing the best thing I could for my pigs, sort of holding their hands, as it were, as they went through death. So, two big lessons. And so on, one thing led to another. And as the farm developed, I never forgot this lesson about my feet hurting the earth, hurting the grass as I walked across it. I was always very much aware when I was growing crops and the soil, the naked earth, not grass beneath my feet, how my feet would crush the grass, would compact it. I was horrified when I watched tractors with their great weights going across the ground and leaving ruts, squashing the life of the soil. Well, this is another subject, I won't go into it now, but squashing the structure of the soil. And I came to realize that I, the farmer, who loved his soil and above all wanted to be a good farmer, I was the worst of parasites on my farm. I was both the creator, but also the destroyer of what I loved. And when I started growing vegetables and I realized I had to cut the heads off cabbages and lettuces and things, I had several experiences where I felt the pain of the plant. It was a shock, literally, as though you were cutting off their heads. You know, and I remember on one occasion it was so real that I knelt down in the field and apologized. It was such a strong impression to me. Yes, I did. Yes, indeed. And I've always felt when I see potatoes and carrots and onions and things treated disrespectfully in markets or in people's kitchens, that these are living creatures with feelings, albeit at a lower order maybe than human feelings, but nonetheless, they have feelings too, just like animals do. Well, here it is. I hope you can see it on the screen. But I find this a most helpful way of approaching the horrors of this world. St. George. Now, in the West, it's very common to see St. George as a sort of muscular, warlike figure wielding a great heavy spear or sword to slay the dragon. But this is actually a Russian icon, which I think has a deeper understanding. The dragon you see is down here. Now, these are the powers of darkness, and this is what we're dealing with in the Ukraine. Darkness. God knows it's a dark situation. And because it's dark, it's almost impossible to understand. And so the whole internet is full of conflicting views of people. Why, what it all about, and disagreement and horrible things being said about one another. And it really is a cesspit of darkness, isn't it? Of course, it's dark, and in the dark we can't see, can we? It's dark. This is the nature of darkness. It's a bottomless pit of the blind leading the blind, falling ever deeper into incomprehension. God knows what this life is all about, this sort of attitude. What's it all for? Well, now, here is St. George on his white horse, which noted isn't actually hurt. He's just dancing over the dragon. It's just sort of like a ballet dancer, just dancing over it. And St. George sits there completely serene and quiet. His arm is raised like that, but in his hand he doesn't have a military weapon. He has a gossamer thin, you hardly see the spear. It's actually a shaft of consciousness. He's looking at the dragon and he's saying, you're just a dragon. You're just a darkness, a power of darkness, you see? And his horse is light, just dancing over it. And there's God up in the top corner. Here's God looking down from heaven. And St. George is in touch with the greater reality. So St. George is still, and when we are still, we are connected with the greater stillness, the infinite stillness, the presence of God. So there we are. When we are still ourselves in the right place, connecting with God, we observe the darkness swirling around our feet, and we can see it for what it is, like a nightmare, my dears. We all have nightmares from time to time, and what happens? You wake up from the nightmare, and it's all gone, isn't it? So darkness, this world, as Jesus plainly tells us, this whole world is really under the powers of darkness. And this is why we don't really know what life's all about. And so we get educated and try to find out that often you don't end up any wiser even when you've been educated. Our human existence is sort of featured by the fact that we just don't know, we don't understand, we don't really know what we're here for. So this is darkness. And this is why this is why Jesus tells us, and it's pretty well established, it's a good thing, that when you enter into this darkness and start taking sides in it and start saying, you get very confused. There's always somebody else who's different points of view. It is confusing, to say the least. Now then, those of you who meditate, and I think most of you who listen to these videos have some sort of practice, or at least know what I'm talking about. What happens when we meditate? It's all in our heads, all these powers of darkness swirling around and getting us all worked up. We try to let go, introduce a mantra, and this has the effect of raising consciousness. So we get at least a bit of space between me, the observer, and this action going on around us, the confusion of the world. If you meditate more deeply, you get more space, you get a higher point of view. And when, after much practice, as I've been meditating since my 20s, you actually begin to realize that this body naturally dies out. But yet, what I really am is not so much that I die out of the world, but the world dies out of me. And I'm ageless. This is the truth of all of us. We meditated long enough and studied this subject, you'll see that the truth is that all of us, it's not just me, we're all of us ageless spiritual beings. Well, let me just develop the theme a bit more. Now, there's a very interesting chapter in Scripture. I've been looking it up because I wasn't too sure of it myself, but I have read it. It's in Matthew 24, when Jesus describes, and ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. And then, goodness me, where does this come from? See that ye be not troubled, for these things must come to pass. Well, there have been wars, haven't there, since the beginning of human history. Jesus tells us, see that ye be not troubled. And then he goes on at the end of the chapter, make sure you're ready. Ready for what? Ready for what he describes as the coming, which are the moments when you get these insights of higher consciousness. And you realize that there are many levels to our perception of this world, just like when we go up a mountain or when we go up in an airplane. To begin with, all the hustle and bustle of the airport is the reality, people getting hot and bothered. You go up in the airplane, you go through the clouds, which are the mind, and beyond the clouds, you can hardly remember what the airport was. So levels of consciousness. And coming back to my early experiences, you see, with the farm, and how can I walk across this field without hurting the grass, and deal with this perpetual killing and destruction of my animals and the plants I love. As meditation developed, I began to realize that I really could help. And my help was in becoming more spiritual myself, so that I wasn't just this destructive element crushing the soil. I was also this spiritual being, almost literally a fairy. And well, I'm now an old man. It's been a lifetime work. So I assure you that just listening to my words on this video aren't going to suddenly bring you into this blessed state. But at least I can hold out to you the promise that this reality is real. And this really, those of you who are wondering what to do, well, as a young man, I also went up to fight the evil forces of this world, or what was called the evil forces of this world. I was in the army, but now I became what they call a soldier of Christ, if you like. That's what some of the old hymns call it. This is the real fight. You fight the powers of darkness. Fight the good fight with all thy might. You fight the powers of darkness. You don't, just like St. George shows us, you don't enter into, you can't fight darkness with a sword or with blood and tanks and things. You fight it with attention and consciousness. You observe these things. And if you can just observe it with one hand, you were in the drama. Of course, God knows it. I'm watching, I'm aware of these things, like same as you are. But if you can just with the other hand, as it were, just hold on to this higher dimension, this higher consciousness, and recognize it. Again, as the old saying goes, these things come to pass. Indeed, the whole immortality comes to pass. Look at me, I'm going to soon be dead. I'm not killed by a rocket, I'm being killed just by the natural process of time. We all are. We don't die one way, we'll die another. But the real life, you see, is not death. The real life is immortality. That's why the promise of all religion is eternal life. Like with my pigs, you see, to the extent that we can observe these horrific events from a point of view of stillness, of the unchanging, you see, of the higher consciousness, then of course that ripples out and has its effect. Peace comes from peaceful people, freedom from those that are free, and the promise of eternal life from those who have found it. You see, this is a million times more effective than getting head up and getting into the conflict. But as I said before, you're really going to just add fuel to the fire. The angels weep, so it's said. So do I. Honestly, if you'd seen me the last few days, tormented in myself, I've come out of it this morning. But yes, we in fact, it's a commandment. The commandment in the Bible to bear one another's burdens. And it's a time like this, we certainly do it. And you see, what's the meaning of the crucifixion? You see, God so loved the world that he sent Jesus into the world. And Jesus bore, just like in my sort of mini sharing in this trouble, I was afflicted with this pain. In that sense, I carried the burden, I shared in the burden, shared in the pain, as I'm sure most people in the world are to some extent sharing in this pain now in their own tormented minds. What on earth, wonder what's it all about? What are we meant to do about it? How can I help? Well, to that extent, we are all sharing something of the burden. And then this illustrates the importance and the practical reality of the work. We're carrying this awful burden. Oh, God help. What God help me? And you see, in that doing, you share the burden. This is what Jesus tells us. Lay your yoke on me. And it's in sharing this burden, you see, with a higher reality, that the burden can be shared, and that the liberation can be found, and peace may flow. There are many upsetting things happening in the world now. You don't need me to tell you. Not only this awful political, you haven't got words in how to describe it, but ecological trouble and all that. There's plenty to suffer about. But there are lots of stories about when you've got two drowning people, someone's got to hold on to something first to help the other one, hasn't he? Otherwise, you'll both drown together. And in this is a typical example of that. That we're all drowning in this pit. Please God, some people find the way out and then can lead others. Yes, certainly compassion is one can hardly help it. It's part of human nature, because we're all in this mess together. The spiritual fact is, you see, this stillness, this presence, this spiritual presence is one, isn't it? It's one undivided. That's the truth of it. There is one overall reality, you see. And it's only when this gets sort of brought down to a lower level of consciousness that it sort of fragments into all the multiple different separations of this world. Yes, I've had several. In fact, there's a young woman who was in Kiev, who's been on my Zoom meditation group, and yes, she was taken out. Yes, I'm very much connected, and of course they're all in as much agony as we are. What is all happening? What on earth's going on? It's absolutely bewildering, and yes, I assure you, my dears, that the higher consciousness is well aware of this and bleeds for it. Jesus is with us, and all of us that are bearing the burden and reaching out to higher consciousness are in a way, in our own inadequate small ways, like mini Jesuses who endeavor to share the burdens of this world and raise the consciousness, and thereby bring the healing that we all long for.